What's going on, everybody? Today I want to recommend you all some manga to check out this Halloween. Uh, if you've read any of this stuff, I'd love to know your thoughts on it. If you haven't read any of this stuff, I definitely highly recommend it. It's different kinds of horrors and just stuff that I think kind of makes sense for this time of year. I haven't done a Halloween recommendations video yet, so this is going to be exciting. Let's jump right into this. These are 5 manga volumes that I think are worth checking out during Halloween, and let's see if we can fan them out, and there they are. I'm going to open this video with Happiness by Shuzo Oshimi. I am a huge Shuzo Oshimi fan. I've read a bunch of his work. I got a bunch of his stuff right here behind me, and he is one of the most prolific mangaka out. The dude has done a ton of different stories. Not all of it is in English. I don't know, I'm not really sure what isn't in English by him, but he's done a ton of stuff, and I think he's most known for like Flowers of Evil and Blood on the Tracks, which has been going on for a really long time. But one of my favorite stories by him is one called Happiness, which is about vampires, and I like his take on vampires because this is like pretty dark and pretty brooding, but it's not like the vampires movie sense, where like you got James Woods running around just being a badass and just saying a bunch of curse words. Like, this is more of like just a really stark sort of a take on the vampire genre, and it follows this young kid who was turned into a vampire, and it follows his essentially life changing, post being transformed by this girl here. Kind of reminds me of this Korean film called The Thirst, and if you've seen that, I think you may draw some of the same connections that I do with this story, and this is definitely worth checking out. It's really bleak, like I said, and the way that Shuzo Oshimi draws, this kid's transformation from just a regular kid into a bloodsucker, I think is pretty well done. And yeah, it's not like, like The Lost Boys where it's all fun and games and whatnot, and it's nothing like Twilight. It's a solid read. I definitely think it's worth checking out, and if this video drops when I think it will, you'll probably have like a couple of weeks before, Halloween comes around. And it's cool to see the way that, people's lives around this kid change as he also changes and becomes a vampire, and the way that things around him change, the way that his body starts to become different, kind of like going through puberty in a sense, but instead of that, he's becoming a completely different sort of a being. So yeah, I really highly recommend this if you like just stark stories, really grim, and I want to say sort of depressing, really bleak, but worth checking out. One of my favorite things about Shuzo Oshimi is that he can tell a story without, using a whole lot of dialogue, and he does that with Happiness. There's entire sections where like there isn't much dialogue at all, but you get what's going on in the visuals of the way that he presents it, and he's able to do that, and that's one of my favorite things about him. He can say so much without saying a single word. So yeah, I highly recommend this as a Halloween read. We got Parasyte by Hitoshi Iwaaki. This was recently re-released in like these big omnibus hardcovers that I think are also in color, if I'm not mistaken. This is a series from like the early 90s or mid 90s or something that wasn't translated into English until like somewhere in the 2000s. But this is actually one of the first manga that I personally picked up when I started getting more into manga collecting, because I'd picked up manga volumes, different parts of my life. I really started getting into it more in recent years, but I've been reading it for a really long time. And this is one of the first series that I bought, and I would buy this like week to week. I would read a volume, like just tear through the volume, and then just like immediately buy the next one and just keep going through it. And this was before the anime came out, so I ended up I didn't watch the whole anime because I'd read the manga, and I mean, to me, like, once I read the manga, like, I really don't go back and watch the anime, but this is a really good story. I love the development of the characters within this tale, and I don't think there's any weak characters in this. So basically, like, the premise of Parasyte is that you got this dude who's like a student. I think he's in high school, like a high school student, who one day, and he's asleep, and then he ends up getting infected with a parasite, and there's this whole thing with these parasites that are coming down to Earth, I think from like outer space. Kind of like Jagan. If you've ever read Jagan, it's pretty much like almost the same deal. And I think I think in my Jagan video I even mentioned that it reminded me of Parasyte. But this was the daddy right here. This is the pappy. This is the pappy of like disfigurement or whatever, like stories, with people being infected with things that alter their appearance. And yeah, this kid gets infected with this sort of parasite, and the purpose of these parasites is that they're supposed to go for your brain and take over your whole body and alter your whole thing, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Only this dude right here is unable to take over the brain and ends up instead taking our lead's hand. And now this creature's name is Migi, that is in the guy's hand. Migi and the kid whose name I can't remember right now off the top of my head, they kind of work together and end up having to fight the other parasites because of the fact that he was unable to get into the brain. He's looked at as like a failure, like he was unable to complete his mission, and he ends up having to like fight all these other parasites. And it's such a wild story, dude. It's so good. It's legit one of the best things I've read. And as you can see, I have the rest of it behind me. But I highly recommend this. If you've never read Parasyte, I mean, you could pick up these single volumes like what I got, or you could even pick up, or I don't even know if this is considered a single volume or not, but you could pick up one of these, or you could pick up the newly released full color ones, I think. I don't know how far along those are. I don't know if the whole set is out yet, because I think that those just started releasing like this year, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not going to get them because like I got these years ago, dude. I got these in like 2015 or 2016 or something, and I don't really feel a need to buy it again. I'm totally happy with these. I don't really want to spend that money if I don't have to. There's plenty of other stuff that I'd love to get my hands on. But yeah, if you like a good action story that's also horror, and yeah, kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like if you like Jagan, if you've read Jagan and you like Jagan, I think that you would like Parasyte. Yeah, I definitely highly recommend this. It's like 8 volumes total, but it's a solid story, dude. It's a great, coming of age, I guess, if you will. Same like with Happiness. Happiness is a sort of coming of age, and Parasyte also has like the coming of age thing with this dude changing as, the parasite changes him, and he changes as a person as he gets older, because in the beginning he's kind of like kind of a pushover, and then he becomes like a completely different person by the end of the story. And yeah, it's a great, like the battles in this thing are wild, and it's a good horror story too, because there are some pretty brutal things that happen and some really sad things that also happen in it. And there's definitely a lot of human emotion, and it's interesting to see the way that even the parasites themselves evolve, as the story goes on. So yeah, I do highly recommend this if you get a chance to check out Parasyte. We got Summertime Rendering. I'm going to be doing a Let's Review at some point about this. I did a video about this series. I don't even know how long ago, like maybe a year ago at this point. I'd say probably like a year ago or maybe more. This is a really good series. If you like time skip or time loop sorts of stories, like if you like things like Groundhog Day or Re:Zero or the Butterfly Effect, that sort of stuff where like you're on a time loop and you keep the day just like resets infinitely. There's another movie too with Jay Baruchel or something that has like a similar premise, but this is more of a horror sort of a setting. So this is like if Re:Zero were like a horror story and it also wasn't an isekai. Though I mean, admittedly, like the first part of Re:Zero is kind of a horror story with that dude just like being reset over and over, like within hours or something. And it was pretty brutal, dude. The first part of Re:Zero was really brutal. But Summertime Rendering is such a phenomenal series, dude. I cannot wait to do my Let's Review about this, because I'm almost done with it. I think I'm on the final volume of this series, and this has just been one of the most amazing things I've read. The level of detail that has gone into Summertime Rendering is just unreal. Yasuki Tanaka has just absolutely knocked it out of the park. This story features so much, like there's so much going on just in the story itself, and then because of how dense it is and how much there is going on, because the story covers like a whole island of people, and what the story is about essentially is that this kid right here, Shinpei, returns home to this island. I forgot what the island was called. I'll put the name of the island down here. But he returns home. It's a fictional island, but he returns home to this island after the passing of his childhood friend. And when he gets there, he sees that things are amiss. If you're a fan of like Junji Ito, you know, like Uzumaki, you know, where like the whole town is weird. There's just like this weird thing about the town, and if you're an outsider looking in, you can kind of see it. But if you've been there for too long, you kind of like turn a blind eye to it. That's kind of like the situation here, where like these people are like turning a blind eye to it. But Shinpei shows up and he starts to see these weird things happening. At the same time, this other lady shows up. Hizuru, I think her name is. She shows up at the same time, and she's there for a really specific reason. And there's these things called shadows. So it's another one, kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers sort of a deal, where like these shadows are replacing the people on this island, essentially like inheriting their memories and taking their places. And what they end up doing is they kind of go about their days, but there's this big event that's coming at some point during like a summer festival. There's going to be this big event where pretty much the rest of the people on the island that are still human are going to be killed. And it's wild, dude. It takes like, there's a lot of stuff, you know, like a lot of moving cogs and whatnot that you know get us to that point in this story. But dude, it's so good. And what I love about it is that Yasuki does this thing where he has notes, character notes, that are written in the vein of Shinpei. Like this dude, this lead character right here, has this thing called like bird's eye view that he does, where like he can just look at something and get like just these insane extreme details out of just looking at it and try to like formulate a response to it. And it's really well thought out, really well articulated. And like you get like whole sections, you know, in between chapters of his thoughts on what's going on. And I like it because it helps you become more immersed in the world. It's like playing Skyrim, you know, and like you find the books and you can choose to read them if you want to. If you don't want to read them, you don't have to. But I did read some of them myself. I read some of the books in Skyrim, you know, that you can find throughout the world, because I feel like it's more immersive, like it brings you into it more. And this doing that with having the notebooks, and you get his notebooks, and I think you get Hizuru's notebooks as well, and it brings you into the world. It makes it a lot more immersive. But not beside that, just beside that, dude, it's still just a really freaky story. It's so well drawn. This dude knocks it out of the park every time with the things that he does, and some of these situations with the monsters and whatnot are really terrifying. And I don't want to say too much about it, because this is a story that's super easy to spoil, because it's so intertwined. The stuff going on is so intertwined, and I don't want to say too much that can, you know, ruin the experience, you know, for you as you go into it and meet these characters. But I love the way they talk too, because they have like this rustic sort of, you know, country speak. And I like that, you know, like even in Japan and just in different parts of the world, you know, just because you don't speak the language doesn't mean that, you know, there aren't like people that are from the country, you know, and every country has its own like essentially country folk. And like me, myself, like my family is from the country, like in Mexico, my family's from the country. And, you know, it's just funny, you know, like hearing those accents, like the country accent. And it's kind of like, you know, the US too, you got the people with country accents, and here these people on this island have country accents. So they say ya, like to say you, they say ya. And it's really cool, man. Like the level of detail, the attention to everything. This story is just an absolute winner, and I cannot wait to finish it so I can do my Let's Review about it. And I highly recommend checking this out for Halloween if you really like reading some time loop, you know, just horror goodness. Definitely highly recommend Summertime Rendering. We got PTSD Radio. I've done a video about this series that has done exceptionally well on the channel. It's got like 2,000 and something views at this point in time. I really do want to do another video about this. Once I finish it, I'm going to do a Let's Review, because I know people have commented on my Let's Talk About video that I did, kind of wanting to know what's going on, and I feel like I have an idea about it, and once I get my Let's Review going, I'll be able to give people answers if they want answers, I guess, if they want to watch that video. Because like my Let's Talk About is me trying to not spoil the story, because that's what I do with those. I don't want to keep saying the same things over and over. Like, if you want to hear more of my thoughts about this thing, you could check out the video that I did about it. But basically, like, there are stories in this, and there's 3 volumes. There are stories in this that are essentially set around like a radio dial, which, PTSD Radio kind of like makes that make sense. And each story is a frequency, and each frequency will sometimes repeat. You'll get like the 22.105 or something, you know what I mean? And then later on it'll be like 22.107, and it'll be that same story, but just continued later on. And I had so much fun with this. Unfortunately, I've heard people say it has kind of a weak ending, after like the 3rd volume. But this first volume, to me, just does not miss. It has been just solid. The horrors that Masaki Nakayama comes up with are just some of the most terrifying things I think I've ever seen. Like, this dude gives Junji Ito a run for his money, and I love Junji Ito. I've talked about that dude countless times on this channel. And this dude, I think, is possibly one of the best horror mangaka out right now. He's got another story too called Fuan no Tane that I hope one day gets translated into English, because I would love to read that story. And yeah, there's like this within the lore, within the universe of PTSD Radio, there's like this hair monster creature like myself, much like myself, that haunts people that I think are tied to these people that did a ritual or tried to do a ritual like centuries ago or a century ago or something like that to get rid of this evil named like Ogushi or something. And they ended up pissing it off. The people ended up pissing it off, and it decided to just pretty much like ruin the lives of these people's ancestors. And that's like what this story essentially follows, like loosely, the premise of it. And it's just so brutal, dude. It's not something that like you want to read at night by yourself. But if you do want something good to read by yourself at night on Halloween, this thing has just some of the most terrifying images. And what's cool too is like it'll be like a page flip to the terrifying image. It'll be like the setup. And I mean, if I'm going to recommend you anything that I think is like the most terrifying thing that I've read in this collection of these 5 volumes, I think this is going to be that story. But this isn't the final one, because I'm saving the final one that I think is just a phenomenal story, a phenomenal collection of stories. And this is a good collection of stories as well that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the grand scheme of things, but it starts to repeat, and you start to see the rhythm of it, and it starts to make more sense, as you go through it and as you experience it. And yeah, I mean, if this cover right here doesn't tell you that this thing is just absolutely freaky, I don't know what will. And there's this thing that happened to the mangaka in real life that I'm not going to cover here because I covered it in my other video. So if you want to see more, about that and about the story that, happened to the creator of this manga, you can check it out in my Let's Talk About video that I did. But yeah, I think this is definitely the most terrifying one. So read this alone. Read this alone by yourself at night on Halloween day, and yeah, I think you will have one terrifying Halloween. Alright, we got Witches. I did a video about this series a while ago. I did a Why You Should Read Witches video. I wanted to save this for last because, well, this isn't necessarily a horror story. It is just one of the best collections of tales that I've read, and this is by Daisuke Igarashi. I've praised the living hell out of this story. I've mentioned it in other videos besides the Why You Should Read video that I did. Witches is a collection of like 5 or 6 stories, if I'm not mistaken, and each one features like a different sort of a witch. And the first witch we meet, I think, is this girl right here, who is a part of a story with this woman who was scorned when she was little by this dude. And because the guy scorned her when she was like a little girl, she decides that she's going to ruin his whole life and ruin his family's lives and ruin the lives of the people that live, in this world with him. But Daisuke Igarashi does this really beautiful thing with this story where he makes it feel like a film. There are these sections where, like, we're going to meet the girl who has to go into the town to fight this woman, and the way that it's set up, where she's just like this young girl living her life like out in the pasture, kind of like nomadic almost, and she is just kind of like out there doing her thing, and she ends up going into the town or the city or whatever to fight this crazed, scorned woman. And the way it's done is really beautifully drawn and kind of terrifying. There's parts of this that are like kind of scary, and overall it's just such a beautiful story. And one of my favorite things about it is there's this rainforest with like these indigenous peoples where this militaristic force wants to come into the forest for profit, and it feels so true to life, something that you could actually see happening. There's a lot of social commentary in Witches, but I just think it's a phenomenal story, dude. If I was going to recommend you something that I just think is a solid read, and it does have like the horror aspect, and there are parts of it that are kind of horror-ish based, overall Witches is just, I think it's a masterpiece, to be honest with you. I honestly genuinely think that this story is a masterpiece. I think it should be consumed. It's a nice thick volume. Like I said, there's a bunch of stories in it. I think it's an award-winning collection as well. The artwork, everything about this, I don't think I've seen many people talk about this story that I know of. I really haven't seen a lot of people mention it like whatsoever. So yeah, I think based on that, it's worth reading. And if you like witches, if you like the occult, I think that this is a good story to check out. And there's a lot of like just intricate little things that go on, and the way that, the stories all loop, within themselves to tell essentially a complete tale. And seeing the different witches, and yeah, because there's like a bunch of different stories with the witches, and there's one with like a priest or something who sees like a tiny little witch. But it's just, I don't know, dude, there's something really wholesome about that one. And it is really well drawn, really well written. I think that there was a lot of thought that went into it by Daisuke Igarashi when he sat down to create this. I don't know if he put this together or if he did these stories individually and then, brought them together into this volume, or how it was done. I don't know myself, but if you do know, please let me know in the comments. I just know that if I was going to recommend you just a story that is beautifully drawn, beautifully written, I think this is it. I would recommend you PTSD Radio for something that's absolutely terrifying, but I would recommend you this for something that is genuinely a masterpiece. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I did a video about it. I did a Why You Should Read. If you want more of like an in-depth, explanation and view into the world of witches that, is more detailed than this surface. Oh, you gotta read it. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of what this is. This is just me being hype about things and wanting to talk about them with you all. And I do recommend every single one of these things that I've mentioned. But yeah, Witches I wanted to save for last because I think this is the best story in this whole set that I've presented to you. Alright, so let's recap everything we just talked about. First up, we got Witches by Shuzo Oshimi. This is a great, stark sort of a story. If you decide to check this out, I'd love to know what you think. Come back to this video or something if you end up reading this, or if you already read it. If you want a good horror vampire story that's like coming of age, really bleak, almost like Stakeland, if you've ever seen that film. But yeah, super bleak, really well drawn, really well written. Yeah, I love this dude. I love Shuzo Oshimi, so yeah, I definitely recommend this one. Parasyte, again, if you like stories that are essentially, like body horrors or whatever, this is a good one to check out if you haven't already read it. Again, same with the other one. If you do check this out or if you have checked it out, I'd love to know your thoughts on it. Please let me know in the comments. If you like Parasyte, there's also like Neo Parasyte, which I haven't personally read, but if you know if that one's good or not, let me know and maybe I'll eventually check it out. But yeah, this is a good body horror story. Summertime Rendering. This one I love because of the incredible amount of detail that this dude has just put into this story, and the world building I think is really solid. The fact that it's set in the country and there's like these country folk that have like these really unique personalities, and I love that the idea that like all these people kind of come together to try to defend their island. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Salem's Lot by Stephen King. But yeah, this is a good like loop story, like die, repeat, like Edge of Tomorrow or whatever, or even like ReZero and Butterfly Effect and all those sorts of things that have the loop, like you die and you come back, only this is like a more terrifying, sort of scary, really well drawn sort of a setting and whatnot. And yeah, this is really good. I definitely highly recommend Summertime Rendering. PTSD Radio for possibly the most scary, the most well drawn, for possibly the most scary, the most terrifying, of the collection. And yeah, it's definitely not going to make a whole lot of sense like going into it, but I think once you like sit through it a little bit and kind of get through the first volume, I think it'll start to make a little more sense. And once you get the idea of the radio dials, kind of coming back and you seeing more of certain things, I think it starts to make a lot more sense. And if not, it's just a good, really freaking story to check out on Halloween. And of course, Daisuke Igarashi's Witches, which, like I said, I would recommend this to you for any reason at all, just because I think it's a solid story. If we were in the bookstore together and you were like, recommend me something, and this was on the shelf, I'd immediately just pick it up and try to do a sales pitch about why you should check it out, because yeah, dude, it's a masterpiece and I think it should be in everybody's collections. So yeah, those are my picks. I hope that you liked them. I'm going to do 2 more real quick that I'm going to do just off the cuff, because I have a feeling somebody out there is going to be like, hey, why didn't you talk about Junji Ito? You're always going on about Junji Ito. Why didn't you recommend us some Junji Ito manga? So I'm going to recommend you these 2 right here for Halloween. This is Remina. This is a really good one. I don't think I ever did a video about this, but this story is solid. And this is about a girl whose father is, I forgot what her dad is, but he names a planet, and that's the planet right there that he names. He names a Remina after his daughter, and the planet ends up being like a death planet that's going to destroy the Earth, and everybody on Earth is going insane, and they blame Remina, the girl, for the planet, coming to Earth, and they try to like kill her, and it's hilarious, but it's also kind of scary, and Junji Ito has such a solid way of, mixing horror and mixing comedy that this is definitely worth checking out. And I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about Remina, so I definitely think that it's worth checking out. I did kind of go through all my collection and look at different things and think like, what are some good Junji Ito stories that nobody ever talks about that I could recommend? Because I could recommend you Uzumaki, but I feel like everybody knows Uzumaki. So yeah, Remina, check it out. Fragments of Horror. This is a really good collection of stories that I don't ever see anyone talk about. One of the most terrifying things I've ever read is collected in this. It's called Blackbird. If you've read Blackbird, you know what I'm talking about. Like, that is legitimately horrifying. That story is an absolute terror. There's also The Whispering Woman, which I think has been memed. I've seen memes with the chick standing behind the girl like pointing, and I've seen it memed on Instagram. So that's where that comes from, The Whispering Woman, in this collection. So yeah, those are the Junji Ito ones I recommend. So I recommend both of these if you want like a good Junji Ito story to check out that isn't, one of the more popular ones like Tomiye or Gyo or Uzumaki. Yeah, definitely check out these. Those are my recommendations. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you have a solid Halloween. This is probably going to drop like way before Halloween, but I wanted to get these out so that I can have stuff that I could present that is, based around the spirit of Halloween and the holiday and whatnot. And given that I don't think I did like any Halloween-based stuff last year, I thought it would be cool to, turn that around and do it this year. I'd recommend you a whole bunch of like October Halloween-based manga and whatnot. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you own any of these, if you've read any of these, I'd love to know your thoughts. Do you like them? Do you hate them? What are your opinions? Let me know in the comments below. Please stick around if you're not subbed to me. I'm just constantly pumping out new content. I want to keep this channel going for as long as I possibly can. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope that you have a solid rest of your day, whatever you got going on. I hope that it is for the best. And yeah, until next time we meet.
Yo, it's himself, the Shadowrunners clique, aka Sleep All Out. Take you on a mental and live for one day, y'all. Sheets, y'all. Guns, y'all. Yo, who got the guns? Who got the coke? Hustling them through like big punch cholesterol before he croak. Rest in peace, but I bless in peace and live to one day lay in shoots. Rap over beats and tell wild stories, the mythology mystery. Choke on your own misery. Fuck them, we're the wild bunch. Yo, I asked him if this bike could punch. This shit made me lose my lunch. Bro grabbed the rocket, I said chill before he cocked it.